Okay, in this video I am making a new Bulleit channel letter sign. I've made about 3 or 4 of these up till now, but they get lost and dropped in the mail and dropped in the jobs, and people don't know what warehouse they end up in, and so they asked me to make them again. And what I have here is an old pattern, and to avoid having to go and get a new print, I'm just doing these quick tracings. There's a lot of room for error in this type of sign, and you'll notice that these letters don't come out extremely perfect, but in the end the final result looks really good. So you'll see I'm just laying out. This happens to be a piece of Baltic birch that was just transferred upstate, just as scrap, good scrap. And I'm cutting the letters out of Baltic birch. In the past I've made the mistake of making these backing letters out of MDF, and it's just too weak. It ends up getting a lot of holes drilled in it and a lot of nails nailed in it, and then the letters begin to crumble. And I made that mistake. There I'm just making a symmetrical letter, so that's why I just cut one part of the pattern, folded it over, and made the other part. Bigger letters like this, it's not quite as critical, but that little I, if I made the serifs a little different, they're kind of noticeable. See some Benzo techniques on how to turn an inside corner. Just chop out what's in your way and let it fall into the hole. And I always do that. People get curious, like, why do you cut up the debris? So when I throw it in the garbage can later, it doesn't tear a bag open. So any kind of odd shaped, big T-bone shaped scrap I cut into small pieces so that they just fall into the garbage bag simply. And these are my lights, got them off of Amazon. And I know from experience that these lights come apart. There's probably somewhere in the world I can buy these lights in pieces before they're assembled, so you could do what I'm doing. But every time I get one of these jobs, it's always like, can you have this done in 2 days? And so that's what one of those jobs. And so here I'm dismantling the sockets on the wire. They fang into the wire, so they kind of go back together fairly simply. And just spacing out the light bulbs, try to space them out evenly. Also, I had 50 light bulbs, and I had to make sure I used at less than 50 light bulbs, otherwise I would have had to buy more. It's 25 on each strip. And I ended up using about 40, 46, I think. 40, 42, I forget. And so here I'm just sanding off. This is a dull Forstner bit I've had probably for 30 years, and it leaves a big twirl at every time it cuts. So I was too lazy to walk across my giant shop and get the brand new Forstner bits. I always keep a set laying right next to the drill press. And now these are spacers. These kind of get broken off in the process ultimately. And these are to keep the letters raised up, so I have enough room behind the letter for the electrical activity that's going on back there, and to keep them spaced up. This is just regular aluminum flashing, and it was 6 inches, and I needed it to be 4 inches just to be more in line with the scale of these letters. So I'm just chopping them off with that chopper that I got at Harbor Freight for $300. And in the past I've bent these around bricks, and on an earlier video I bent them around steel bricks, but here this flashing was so pliable, I could just do it all by hand. I never had to do anything but just bend it by hand. And the serif letters really lend itself to this, because when you bend it tight and then you open it, you end up with what seems like a serif on each side of the bend, and it seems to work perfect. And I'm not too stressed out about making one strip around the entire letter. It's actually easier to do it in pieces because you're not flip-flopping around a 6-foot piece of metal. So when I do it in pieces, it's easier. And I just throw some crazy glue behind the seams. It keeps them together pretty good. Sounds like someone's rearranging the kitchen. Sorry about that. And here I am just working. This one I slowed down. They're all super fast. And this one I slowed down so you could see more in line of what I'm doing. But doing something like this seems really daunting until you actually just think to yourself, let me do the next 5 inches, let me do the next 5 inches, let me do the next 5 inches. And then all of a sudden you're around a full letter and it's only been a few minutes. And you're like, oh, I only have 6 letters to do. And as you do this, you get better at it as you go. There's no doubt about it. So the first one will be difficult. By the time you finish, you're going to know exactly the ins and outs of how to do this again and again. Overbend it, bend it open. And I'm throwing a couple of air nails in there. Keeps everything close. You got to be careful with those air nails because they punch through that thin aluminum. I should have waited till the dishwasher was empty, I'm sorry. And so here we go. Just gluing again. I slowed this one down just so you could see more details. And the crazy glue dries right away between this real thin surface like that. And there we go. And even though these letters might not look perfect now, I'll go back and tweak them as I pop in the letters and pop in the light bulbs and such. With a big letter like this, it's nice to do one big run through the curve because you don't want to have a seam on that curve. So that's why I always try and land two pieces together on a flat. You don't want to land two pieces together. You don't want a seam on a curve because they'll never stay together. And if you can end the joint, I see I'm going to end one of those joints right at the top of that serif. It's also another way to hide the joints. The joins, whatever you want to call them. And now I'm going to kind of fast forward through the E. The E is probably the most complicated one because of all those little inside-outside folds, but do it in sections and it makes life a lot simpler because you're not flip-flopping around that big piece of metal. And I've done this a few times, so if you've seen this, I apologize if it's repetitive, but I just thought maybe people who haven't seen it before and people who have will see some new techniques. Every time I do something like this, I figure out something new. And now here I'm doing the last letter as the B. I worked with the sign flipped over. So I went from forward to backwards. And there's no method. I just kind of tack the easy letters first just to get them out of the way. You can see there I glued that. I did a little bit of hot glue here and there. But hot glue gets messy if you use a lot of it. It starts to create strings and it gets all over the place. So the CA glue works pretty good. Try and throw a nail in there too, just to be sure. With a good jolt, that CA glue will let go, so it's always good to follow up with a nail or two. And there's our final letters, and now we go to the paint. I flood it with white just to fill in whatever little crevices I can, and also just so the yellow pops. Or that's orange, rather. I want the orange to pop, so I just give a nice base of white. And I followed up with a flat black, which I didn't like, but it became a good primer. I ended up going to a gloss black. Looked much better. And I say it all the time, those Montana colors are so full of pigment. They're so rich. They look great. Rust-Oleum and Krylon are pure garbage. I only use them because sometimes the local hardware store only carries that. So if it's the only color I can find, I get it. But Montana Gold 100% of the time, Rust-Oleum and Krylon are just pure garbage. Unless, of course, they want to pay me to say good things about them, then they're great. Until then, they're garbage. And here I'm just hot gluing the letters from the back. These are actually the sockets. I'm stuck the sockets in. And now I'm going to assemble the sockets again, but where I want them to. If I just would have stuck the sockets in, I would have had 12 inches of wire between every socket that's only a couple inches apart. And so here I put it, and I have a piece of wood on the other side, so when I smack it, the clips grab real good. And I have to test each one. The fangs don't always grab. You get a test, and there was a few failures, but I didn't show them. That's why this is fairly tedious. Just put on a good podcast and chill out. I don't know where I just ran away from. I would have edited that out. This is the final edit. I always just lay it down and do a voiceover over it. And so I'm just throwing the clips in. A couple of the clips broke when I was dismantling them, but not enough to make a difference. They were in the leftover pile. And you'll notice I have that block of wood on the other side of the socket so that I can hammer down the clip. Because that clip goes in, but by banging it, the fangs puncture into the wire, which creates the electrical connection. And here I am, just testing all the bulbs. And I leave the bulbs in the whole time because I want to make sure that if I disconnect any one of them by accident or if it gets jolted, I want to know which one is the one. So the rest of the time I work on the sign, the light bulbs stay on. And now I need to make a curve back. There we go. That was a long hold. And this is just a strip of paper. I laid the letters out in the arc I want, and I just do a rubbing. And now these are all the little sections of the rubbing, so that'll be in a straight line. I have something to screw to. This again is more of that scrap Baltic birch that I had, which is much stronger, takes a nail better. And you see as I lay that out, it kind of vaguely stays in a straight line. Let's give it a couple of tacks with the nail gun. Always with the setting high so the nails don't poke through the aluminum. And this is my strip, cut off camera, painting everything black. And I've painted all those filler parts black. And now I lay it out gently and screw it. You don't want to glue this because if you flip it over and you realize one of the letters is out of whack, you got to break that glue joint. So I put one screw in it, and then I flip it over and I adjust whatever letters need to be adjusted. In this case, the EIT was a little out of line. I didn't fix it until after the video is completed. So you'll notice the EIT is a little disjointed there. The I is a little tilted. I ended up unscrewing it and repositioning it. So the E, now the L and the E don't line up, and the E and the I and don't line up. Just subtlety things that I see. And that's how we're going to hang this sign. All in, it probably weighs about 10 pounds. It's not very complicated as far as weight structure goes. And there it is, hanging on the back of the garage door. And there's some branding. So I hope you got something out of this. Oh, hello, Taylor. Hi. Want to say hi? No. Thanks for watching. Thank you for all my new patrons. I really appreciate the love and support. Thank you, guys. See you again soon. Brett is the cameraman, Brett McAfee. Look him up.